Welcome to the Sports Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Luer, and I'm very excited to have no other than Mr. Dell, a true living legend in our industry. He is one of the founding fathers of the sports agent and sports marketing industry. I'd love to give you a quick highlights on his tremendous career.
I did play Davis Cup myself in singles and doubles 5 times for America in the 60s. The game of tennis went open in 1968, which meant pros could play with amateurs and there could be prize money. But I retired from tennis in 66. I had gone to law school at Virginia and went back to a big law firm in Washington. I decided in 1970 that I would start my own law firm. But an ironic thing happened. I took Arthur Ashe 3 times to meet Mark McCormick for breakfast, and I thought he would be really happy and well served by going with Mark. And after the third breakfast, we were driving down the east side of the river in New York City in a taxi, and Arthur sort of looked at me and said, "How many more times are you going to do this?" And I said, "Do what?" He said, "You keep taking me to Mark, and you know, we've been there 3 times, and I don't feel very comfortable, very close to him." And he said, "Well, why don't you do it?" I said, "Do what?" He said, "Why don't you manage me, represent me?" And I said, No, I'm going back to my law firm, and I really want to be a trial lawyer." He said, "Well, look, we'd really have a lot of fun if you would do that. Stan would probably join us." Stan was a good friend of Arthur's, and they had been on the team together for 2 years. He said, "We could do it and start a new business." And so I went back to my law firm and asked the senior partner what he thought of the idea. He raved about it and said, "We'll give you the 5th floor. We'll give you tax accountants, lawyers, specialists, and I think it's a great idea to get into sports management, sports marketing." And I said, "What would be the name?" He said, "Well, it'd be first Hogan and Hartson." So I thought about that for about 3 weeks and then decided that for better or for worse, I wanted to try and start it myself. And I did, and I started to call the law office of Donald Dell. There were 2 people, me and a secretary, but those were just great fun times, and we were lucky on the timing because in 1970, January, when I started, I was really the first sports agent in tennis anywhere in the world, and really one of the first in the game.
Amazing. I love that story. Now, before I move on, I do want to touch a little bit on Air Jordan and Nike, because I know you also played a significant role in that. And of course, maybe even more people would know Air Jordan and the Nike shoe. Tell us a bit about that.
Sure. Well, Michael came out from the University of North Carolina as a junior. He came out in 1983. And in 84, he was playing for the Chicago Bulls. And adidas and Nike were both trying to sign him. And 2 of the Nike guys came to our office in Washington. And I remember I'll never forget, it was a Saturday morning, about 10:30. We were sitting in my office. And there were 4 of us. Rob Strasser was there, Peter Moore. And we were just throwing around. We wanted a Jordan shoe, and they wanted a Nike shoe. We were fighting over, what we were going to call it.
Right.
And suddenly, literally out of the blue, Peter Moore, and there have been many stories, but Peter Moore said, "Well, what about Air Jordan? How do you like the idea Air Jordan?" And everybody just stopped and stunned and thought, "God, what a great idea! What a great name!" And he really was the one. You've heard stories all over this one, and thought it up. Somebody else thought it up. Jordan did. I did. That's all baloney. Peter Moore thought of the word Air Jordan, and we jumped at it, and that's how it got started. And the first contract was a 5-year contract with Michael and Nike, and it was called the Air Jordan shoes. When that period was almost over, after about 4 years, Phil Knight, who was a good friend, came to me and said, let's do another deal, but I want to talk about royalties and so forth. And so in the second contract, we got very lucky. We did something a little different. We got a 5% royalty, I believe, on his shoe, the name shoe. But we also secretly got a second bucket of a royalty of 3% on all basketball shoes sold by Nike.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, Nike took off in basketball, and they really started dominating all over America.
Right.
So that second bucket of 3%, very, very quickly, which we didn't talk about to anybody, got bigger and bigger and bigger. And suddenly Phil came to me and said, "Look, let's sit down and talk about a new deal, but let's stop paying all these royalties. Let's really build a company." And so By that time, Michael had been with me 10 years, and he was leaving to go on with someone else. And the deal that we worked out was a 29-year contract for a company called Jump Inc., whereas Michael and Nike were partners in the company. And that company today is selling $2.5 billion worth of product. It uses the logo of Jordan.
Yep.
It's owned by Nike, but it's shared very, very strongly by Michael Jordan with Nike. So it was a very clever idea by Phil Knight, and Michael, of course, has implemented it very well.
Yeah,
So it's a big success.
huge.
Said today, most people don't know Stan Smith. They know the Stan Smith shoe.
Correct.
As one of Stan's children said, Dad, I'm really trying to understand, are you a shoe? Are you a person? What's happened really to their credit, Adidas has done a phenomenal job of marketing the shoe and keeping it going. You know, about 6 or 8 years ago, the sales had been discounted all over the world. So they came to Stan and I and said, we'd like to go black and not sell one shoe for 2 years. We'll pay you a small percentage of your fee. We won't sell one shoe, and then we'll start in the third year and rebuild the thing.
Wow.
And that's exactly what they did, and the demand really took off we went black in 12 and 13, and in 14 they brought it back, 2014, and the sales really took off. And that's a credit to Adidas. I mean, they had different singers wearing it, celebrities wearing it. It became a fashion shoe, and that's really what took off. Well, I think a couple basic things. First of all, understand it's all about people, so you have to have good people skills. Secondly, you really want to keep your word when you make deals or when you're talking to people. Don't try to impress people with, promise too much. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. Keep your word. Be realistic. But I think the most important aspect is have a passion for what you're doing. If you really care and like it and want to be the best at it you can be, you will really move forward. But you have to be, besides passion, you have to be persistent. You have to continue. I mean, it's easy to say never take no for an answer, but there's a certain tone to that. Obviously, somebody says, I'm not going to do the deal, they're not going to do the deal. But you've got to persist and really believe in yourself and believe your product is good, and then be flexible, be realistic. Because remember, one of the things, you don't have to win every point or every dollar. It's all about renewals as well. You don't want to just be a one-shot transaction. You want the people that you deal with in certain areas want to come back and make other deals with you later. And the only way you're going to do that is to be fair and reasonable and realistic when you're dealing with these people. And still, keep your word and be darn hard and persistent. You've got to be, and it's not just a glamour, it's a very difficult, competitive business in the sports world. Everybody wants to be in it. Everybody thinks it's easy. It's not easy, and it's not glamorous. Got to tell the client the truth. The better you do that, the more he's going to respect you. When the going really gets tough in a negotiation, he's going to trust you. But if you're always stroking him and always, I used to say in recruiting to people, I'm not a masseur. If you want somebody to stroke you and tell you all the good things that you are, fine. But that's not me. I'm going to tell you the truth, whether you like it or whether you don't. And of course, over years, you build up a reputation. So I'm not worried today about being fired, but I worry that some of the young people will not always tell the client the real accurate factual situation for fear that they're not impressing him or they're going to lose him. And that's a terrible weakness in our industry.
No, I love the quote. You can't fear to be fired. I'm going to have to remember that
Exactly.
one. I love it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The sports marketing world is a very lucrative world, but it's a very small world. Take, for example, Marcus, you're from Kuala Lumpur, I'm from Washington, D.C., and yet we've known each other and worked together in the sports world for over 20 years.
That's right.
And that's really the case. You could list, as I could, 10 people that you worked with in companies and in businesses that are very, very important. Yeah. And you have certain relationships. Like I had a relationship with Dassler and Adidas for years. And, when you put people like Lendl, Connors, Ash, Noah, Edberg, all with one company like Adidas, you really build a relationship that is lasting and permanent. So a couple of things on the learning side. You want to really understand it's about people. It's not anything else. It's about getting and having relationships. How do you do that? Well, it's your people skills. You got to work to get to know the people. For example, I don't think in today's world with email and the smartphones, I always preach that you can't make any great deal or important deal without meeting in person. You want to go see the person. If it's an important deal, if you're negotiating something, you can't do it by email.
I agree.
The easiest thing in the world is someone say, well, we're going to go in another direction. Sorry. Well, what does that mean? You have no idea. But if you go see somebody and he says, gee, we're not interested because, then you can get a much better flavor and understanding. Or the reverse, which is what you're trying to do, is how do you get him to say yes and work out a favorable deal? So that's the first thing. You should do it in person if you can. Secondly, you have to be very, very persistent. You're gonna get a lot of no's, and you just got to keep coming back and working at it if you think you're in a good position or in the right position. And you got to be flexible. You got to really understand the market. So when you go in and ask for something, an endorsement contract, let's say the value of I'm making this up, but let's say the value of a watch deal is $100,000. So you go into Rolex or Citizen or some of these well-known watches, and you can't come in and say, yeah, I want I want 400,000 or I want $1 million. That is way, way above the market. If the market, in my hypothetical, is 100, then you want to come in maybe 150, and when you work it all out, you'll be at 100 and 110. That's what you hope. Yeah. Now, you can raise that depending on the market, but you have to be, what I'm saying is you have to be realistic. You have to know the market, you have to understand the people, and you have to be reasonable in your negotiations. There's two thoughts I had on that. One, you only get out what you put in. If you really work hard at something, you're going to get something back by your efforts. But I also think this simple phrase that Nike came up with, just do it, is brilliant. And it's really apropos of the world we're in, Just do it, i.e., tell the truth, work hard, get it done if you can. But, we don't need all the bells and whistles and all the BS around it. Just do it.
Do it.
And if you're good at that, and keep your word and keep your relationships with people, you're going to be a success.
Awesome. Fantastic. I thank you so much for your time. That was really very enjoyable, 50 minutes about here. And I learned so many things. I scribbled a bunch of stuff down. I'm going to listen to this again after we're done. Again, thanks so much, Donald, and I'm sure we'll talk again some more soon.
Well, Marcus, it's been fun. I've always admired and respected you as a friendly competitor, I would call it, although we've been more friends than competitors because you're over in different areas of sport. But it's been a fun and pleasure for me to share it with you, and I wish you good luck.